from Psalm 34, verse 17. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Yesterday, the members of this house may have been political adversaries, but today I think we are all in one position. Today we are parents, we are brothers, and we are sisters, because one of the members of this house lost his son. And it's during times like these that everything else that's going on doesn't really matter right now. We can get to the other stuff later, but we have to mourn with those who mourn, and we have to support those who are among us. And so today, I offer my condolence, and I also offer my prayers for the family. Having children myself, and I think there are many parents in this place, maybe everyone is a parent, but there are many parents in here. And when you have to go through an ordeal like that, you know, it's hard to imagine. Sometimes there are situations where there are no words to say. And in those times, the best we can do is to just stand and support. So today, we stand in support of our brother, Romy Ferreira, and we continue to pray that God would give him strength during this very challenging time, and that in time, the healing will take place. The pain is present, and the healing is to come with time. So we stand with him today. I want us to bow our heads together. Father God, we just thank you that we have another day to celebrate. Lord, we have experienced this very challenging situation with one of our members. And Father, today as brothers and sisters and parents, we stand together and we pray for his strength. Lord, we pray for his comfort, and we pray for his peace during this time. We thank you for the opportunity to conduct the business of this house, but some things are more important. And so we just take a moment to just remember our brother. And as we proceed today, we thank you for your guidance. We thank you for your Holy Spirit to give us direction. And may everything that we say and do be done decently and in order. In Jesus' name. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Dr. Hubert Minnis, Peter Turquette, Ransom Manette, Desmond Bannister, Redmond Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Dwayne Sands, Marvin Davis, Frankie Campbell, Dionisio Diaguila, Michael Quintard, Darren Henfield, Ramal Ferreira, Lanisha Rose, Renzo Rose, Alfred Johnson, Philip Davis, Dawn Miller, Patricia Parker Edson, Tyron Lewis, Carlton Boland, James Audrey, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Sanders, Frederick Michael Pines, Hank Johnson, Mark Hughes, Michael Folks, William Rafi Emmanuel, Steve Strickland, Ruben Ramin, Ricky Matthews, Shannon Cartwright, Sean L. Ferguson, Leonard Tanner Martin, Michael Paul, Chester
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, I wish to accept and endorse the sentiments expressed by our chaplain this morning with respect to the honorable member from Marathon, having experienced such a sad loss of his son since the last sitting of this parliament. I'm certain that all members here feel as I do with respect to the sense of loss and the level of grief that the member for Marathon and his family must be experiencing at this time, particularly when you lose someone who is so young and so full of life. All I can say, having known the member from Marathon, I happen to have done some of my illegal training and pupillage in his law firm. It's real sad and real difficult having to experience such a loss. Honorable members, at this time, I wish to address a matter that occurred during the last sitting of this parliament that has gotten a lot of coverage in the public domain. That matter has to do with the bill that was brought to this House that sought to repeal the Ocean Industries Incorporated Aragonite Mining Encouragement Act of 1971. Since the last sitting of this House, at the time of the last sitting, this chair offered the position that the presiding officer of this House was of the view that Section 64, subsection 2 of the rules of the House of Assembly produced onerous requirements and conditions that, in the opinion of the presiding officer, was deemed to be unconstitutional. And so that provision of our rules, by declaration of the chair, was deemed ultra vires the Constitution. Because according to our Article 59, subsection 1 of the Constitution, all members of this parliament are eligible and privileged to bring matters or bring a bill to this parliament. Notwithstanding having said that, certain information was brought to this presiding officer's attention since that sitting, and that information caused this presiding officer to get a copy of the bill, or the act rather, that is the subject of that bill. And upon review of that act, I discovered in that act provisions that touch taxes, duties, levies, fees, charges in that act, and also in that act at section 3, there's a section that deals with the royalties due to the government based on the mining of aragonite and other materials with respect to the information or the privilege granted under the lease in this act. As a consequence, the bill that is before this House is a money bill because it seeks to repeal an act that touches the consolidated funds. Now, the Constitution, which I relied on strongly on Wednesday, I must rely on again today under Section 59. Section 59(1) gives the members of Parliament the right to bring private members' bill. But Section 59, subsection 3 says this, and I'll read this into the record so that it will be very clear. Except on the recommendation of the Cabinet, signified by a minister, the House of Assembly shall not, A, proceed upon any bill, including any amendment to a bill, which, in the opinion of the person presiding, makes provision for imposing or increasing any tax, for imposing any charge on the consolidated fund or any other public fund, or altering any such charge, otherwise done by reducing it, or for compounding or remitting any debt due to the Bahamas. And it goes on, Article 59, subsection 3B, it says, the Parliament should not proceed upon any motion, including any amendment to a motion, the effect of which, in the opinion of the person presiding, is that the provision shall be made for any of the purposes aforesaid. And in those circumstances, this presiding officer is of the view that unless the Cabinet, through one of its ministers, approve the bill, this is indeed a money bill, and Section 59, Article 59, subsection 2 says, a bill other than a money bill may be introduced in either house, but a money bill should not be introduced in the Senate. So I believe that this provision or these provisions in the Constitution under Article 59 makes it very clear that a money bill can only be introduced and proceeded upon in this Parliament with the consent of the Cabinet through one of its ministers. Now, of course, we know also that this House was first introduced to this matter with respect to the Sovereign Wealth Fund and Natural Resources by the Honorable Member for Golden Isles in his capacity at the time as an independent member of this Parliament. Subsequent to that, and I think to the dismay of the member for Golden Isles, the member for Centerville moved for a select committee on this matter with respect to the issue of natural resources and the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And so we arrived at Wednesday of last week when the member for Pine Ridge brought to this House the bill that is seeking to repeal the Ocean Industries Incorporated Aragonite Mining Encouragement Act of 1971, which is in no doubt, in my estimation, an act that touches the consolidated fund and falls within the provision of Article 59, subsection 3. And so in that regard, having recognized also that when the motion was made for the select committee, this House, by unanimous consent, agreed to the select committee. In my estimation, we are at the point now where the government would have to indicate to this Parliament its position with respect to moving forward with this money bill, which is obviously before us. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Speaker, I thank you for the clarity that you would have brought. Mr. Speaker, you stood on the Constitution at our last sitting in regards to a member being able to bring private bill. And at the time, Mr. Speaker, it was the position of the government, of this administration, that that bill was a money bill and should have been referred to the select committee. Mr. Speaker, as you rightfully pointed out, the select committee that was agreed to unanimously in this House, not one member objected. Mr. Speaker, a select committee that has on it champion of natural resources, the Honorable Vaughan Miller from Golden Isles, the Honorable Member from Centerville, the Honorable Member for South and Central Andros. Mr. Speaker, now we have another champion in the House, Pine Ridge, in regards to that, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, the position of the administration has been and remains that we seek to be open and transparent in regards to the circumstance when it comes to natural resources, whether it's the sea whip, the fauna and flora of the country, whether it's the sponge that Revlon seems to love from San Salvador, whether it's the sea whip that we know has anti-inflammatory properties that is now being harvested by some pharmaceutical companies, whether it's the oil we're about to drill for, whether it's the salt in Inagua and elsewhere, whether it's the aragonite from the 11 aragonite sites that we have in country. Mr. Speaker, we turned this House by unanimous consent, turned all of those issues over to the select committee, a bipartisan select committee of this House, to look into all of those issues, to be transparent, to allow anyone to come. The committee, as we all know, the select committee, the powers of that select committee is they have the power to send for persons and papers and records and to sit from place to place. Any person, any paper, any record. And so, Mr. Speaker, the position of the administration is we seek to be as accommodating, Mr. Speaker, as possible with the Bahamian people's patrimony. That bill that was put forward, Mr. Speaker, we move that be put in that bipartisan select committee. And all the talk, Mr. Speaker, about it going there to die, that is not the position of the government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and so, Mr. Speaker, based on the fact that you would have spoken very clearly to the Constitution, Article 59.3 says money bills shall not be brought by any other entity in this country other than the cabinet in the Bahamas by one of its ministers. And so, Mr. Speaker, I so move that the bill that was introduced, that is for first reading, that in progress, it should be sent to the select committee, where even the persons out there in the public sphere who are talking about that bill would have an opportunity to go to that select committee, which is led by the honorable, able, and capable chairman, Michael Folks. On that committee, Golden Gates. And on that committee is the honorable, capable member from Golden Isles. Honorable, capable member from Centerville, honorable, capable member from South and Central Andhra. And all of it, Mr. Speaker, I'm just putting forward the policy of the government. And all of it, Mr. Speaker, has been agreed. Listen.
Honorable members,
They're telling me stay focused. You know, Cat Island. You and I had a conversation.
Honorable
My
members.
boss, Cat Island. And Mr. Speaker, I said then, a man's gifts. The good book says, Mr. Speaker, a man's gift makes room for him. So I don't worry about such things, Mr. Speaker. The only job I've been auditioning for, I've got. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I will move that this bill, this money bill, be sent to the Select Committee, where we have able-bodied, honorable members of this House who will deal very effectively with that issue.
Is it second?
Second motion by the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Honorable member. I just want to make it clear as we proceed that according to May parliamentary practice, that a motion to move a bill to Select Committee means that the bill will remain on the agenda and that the Select Committee will then, on its report, will report to this House whether or not it recommends that the House proceeds or not proceed. And of course, that is also based on whether or not the government agrees to proceed on a money bill. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for clarity, so I can know, and for the laypersons that are listening and watching, particularly Mama Down and Crooked Island. So the bill that I have laid on this House on behalf of the people, as they have asked me to do, and I'm quite comfortable I would have done what they would have asked and required of me, is now on the shoulders of this House. But just for clarity, after laying this bill, 4 days later, we are now finding out, or the interpretation is that the bill that I laid is now considered by this government a money bill.
No, honorable member.
I'm asking for clarity.
Honorable member, the clarity that I gave was that having examined the act that your bill seeks to repeal, I discovered that the act touches the consolidated fund, which makes it your bill a money bill. Because if your bill is to succeed, for example, it will affect the consolidated fund by also repealing the provisions of this act that gives royalties to the government under this particular act. And this act also deals with the concession, taxes, and duties with respect to the lease and the mining.
I think that's precisely the point by the majority of the Bahamian people, that the royalties are penance in comparison. And
Honorable member, we're not here to debate that.
Okay.
What so I'm laying out for you is
so
the
let me just ask another question.
The law, and the rules.
So I will ask another question through you, Mr. Speaker. We recognize that you do have a select committee. The unfortunate thing is that most of the select committees that have been placed by this House have not been functioning. I can't even tell you when was the last time this select committee that you're speaking of has even met. So could you give me an idea as to when this select committee
Honorable member, resume your seat a moment. First of all, honorable member, it's disingenuous to suggest to the public that you do not know something. And by you saying that you do not know it, you are making certain implications and suggestions. When we have the honorable member, and I have the clerk here who sits on all of these committees, the honorable member for Golden Gates, Rise Place. Are you able to say how many times and how often you have been meeting and where you are in terms of your progress with this select committee?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad to do so. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the good people of Golden Gate and as chairman of the House Select Committee on Natural Resources, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this House, as the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town just said, unanimously, everyone consented and agreed to the request for Select Committee of Natural Resources. And it was moved by the Honorable Member for Centerville.
Honorable member, get to the point.
Yes, I will. I will, Mr. Speaker, if you would allow me, sir. If you would allow me, I will. Moved by the Honorable Member for Centerville. And that happened, the agreement, Mr. Speaker, happened on the 8th of July, 2020. That's when that happened, sir. Mr. Speaker, you appointed the person to that committee. I was mentioned a moment ago by Bamboo Town. Mr. Speaker, this House accepted the terms of reference of the committee as put forward. Mr. Speaker, the terms of reference of the committee.
Honorable member, just a moment. I'm happy that you mentioned the terms of reference.
Yes, sir.
Do you have them with you?
I have it on my phone, sir, and I'm going to read it.
Read it for me, please.
Phone and read it. Precisely, sir. Exactly the point. Mr. Speaker, this House accepted the terms of reference proposed by the mover, Centerville, without any amendment. No amendment or change. And I will read it, sir. To investigate all matters relative to the natural resources of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, above and below the terrain and the sea, to identify the sources of the natural resources that contribute to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, as well as entities, historical and current, engage in the extraction, identify areas of disbursements, recommend to Parliament mechanisms to enhance accountability and transparency in awarding contracts or exploration and extraction and receipt of disbursements, and to consider and suggest the best ways to ensure that the birthright of every Bahamian is legally protected, with power to send for persons and papers, with leave to sit from place to place, and with leave to sit during the recess, sir.
Honorable member, thank you. Now, the question was, have you met?
Yes, yes, sir. And the first meeting, I'm coming right to that, sir. The first meeting following the appointment was the 22nd of July. 22nd of July was the first meeting. The appointment was made on the 8th of July. We had several meetings leading up to when we came back to this House, sir, because the original appointment ended on the 1st of October, and we were fast approaching that, and we did not get as much work done as we'd envisioned due to COVID-19. So we came back here on the 23rd of September, and we requested of this House leave to extend the life of the committee, sir. That was done right here in this House. Again, unanimously approved by this House. To the 1st of April, 2021, sir. To give this committee a lot of time to get its work done. We are serious about the work, about the patrimony of Bahamians, sir. We are very serious. Sir, the committee has been making good progress. As Pastor Burrows said just last week, he talked about making progress, and we are making progress, sir. That's exactly what we're doing. The chairman of the Select Committee, one final point, Mr. Speaker, and I'll...
When was the last time the committee met?
We met last week. It was last week, Mr. Speaker. We met last week. We meet, I can tell you,
Give the date for the record.
we meet practically every week, and the only reason we do not meet every week, Mr. Speaker, is because the Senate chamber is not available. Because we meet over there because of the social distancing. The initial meeting was downstairs in the a government committee room, and we were unable to meet there because we could not social distance. And as you know, Mr. Speaker, you made those facilities in the Senate chamber available to us. And so sometimes we cannot meet there when we plan to because the Senate is meeting. So we've had to work with their schedule. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, we planned to meet every week. There isn't a week we didn't plan to meet, sir. Every week. And we've had many meetings. And so I just want to finish up on the natural resources. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member intends.
Honorable member, I think that suffices.
No, Mr. Speaker, I just like, if I may.
Honorable member, that's sufficient for now.
Thank you.
This is not order of the day. I extended the honorable member. This matter, I believe, there's a motion on the floor. We permitted persons to speak on the motion. The motion really is been put by the honorable member for Bamboo Town that the House. Can I have a copy of that bill? Do you have it handy? Honorable members, it's been moved and seconded that the following bill be sent to the committee, the Select Committee on Natural Resources. Ocean Industries Incorporated, Aragonite Mining Encouragement Repeal Bill 2020. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The motion is carried. The bill for Industries Incorporated, Aragonite Mining Encouragement Repeal Bill 2020 by unanimous consent of the House will be sent to the Select Committee. Honorable member. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. Statements and communications by ministers. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Mount Moriah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to you once again. Mr. Speaker, Martin Luther King Jr. once commented, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? The greatest service that any government can provide to its people is safety and security. This is because safety undergirds national development. This Hubert-Minnis-led administration fully understands that safety is critical to sustaining the socio-economic development of our nation. Despite one of the worst global health crises in 100 years, our administration has maintained all essential public services, including healthcare, education, food and rent subsidies, and other social benefits. The foreshadow amendments will certainly reflect that this administration's commitment to answering Dr. Martin Luther King's question. They will certainly go a long way in advancing our society, its institutions, and processes by ensuring that no member, irrespective of age, health, ability, disability, or gender is disenfranchised from exercising their inalienable right to vote. This is because voters' registration is one of the cornerstones of our democracy. Mr. Speaker, my strength and help cometh from the Almighty Father's continued blessings. His grace continues to reflect in the support of my dear wife, Stacy, our two children, Joshua and Kai, our extended family in the form of the Mount Moriah constituency and its residents, all of whom continue to repose their trust in me. Specifically, I would like to extend the best of greetings to the F&M Council of Mount Moriah, as well as the associations of Millennium Gardens, Stapleton Gardens, and Yellow Elder Gardens. The same is extended to every residence throughout our constituency. Mr. Speaker, service leadership prescribes for empowering people and institutions for the common good. According to William Ward, the roots of happiness grow deepest in the soil of service. On a daily basis, I strive to uphold the principles and practices of our democracy by inspiring the officers of the Ministry of National Security and agencies under remit to continue to perform their duties diligently and to the highest standards attainable. Mr. Speaker, I am honored to have led the Ministry of National Security for the last 3.5 years. As elected officials, Mr. Speaker, we have an obligation to remain mindful of the needs of the people we are elected to serve. We strive to be at the forefront of change, which will benefit and enrich their lives. Bahamians have been challenged since September 2019, with the landfall first of Dorian, followed by this COVID-19 pandemic that we continue to endure. Mr. Speaker, these major crises continue to result in extreme financial hardships, ill health, high unemployment, displacement, and uncertainty for so many of our people. It is one of the reasons why I am so thankful to the Parliamentary Commissioner, Mr. Turner, and his hard-working staff at the Parliamentary Registration Department. It would be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, if I did not thank the Attorney General's office, especially Dame Anita Allen, the Law Reform Commissioner and Director of Law Reform, Ms. Tina Roy, and their hard-working staff for making this bill that we are about to debate today possible through their tireless effort. Mr. Speaker, I am also thankful to the brave men and women of our law enforcement agencies, including the police force, the defense force, the Department of Corrections, and although not in my ministry, Department of Customs and Immigration. During these challenging times, and despite the severe impact of these crises on our socioeconomic institutions and familial constructs, your commitment and dedication remain unwavering. Your time, talents, and treasures offered in service to your country under these circumstances are much appreciated by our government and people. Mr. Speaker, before I begin my substantive remarks, I would like to extend my condolences to the families of law enforcement officers and those in my constituency, retired law enforcement officers, as well as serving law enforcement officers who would have passed during this year. I also extend heartfelt condolences to my cabinet colleague, the Honorable Ramon Pereira, on the passing of his son. Your family remains in our prayers during this most difficult period. Mr. Speaker, in a democracy, all eligible citizens are able to participate freely in public elections when they exercise the right to vote. Democratic elections serve to ensure the principles of legal equality, political freedom, and the rule of law. These principles are best achieved when, one, the general public have faith in the electoral process. Two, voters have freedom of political expression and freedom of speech and association. Three, all eligible citizens have an equal say and equal access to voting. Four, there are enforceable election laws. And five, there is effective democratic governance. Mr. Speaker, this minister-led administration understands that through the electoral process, the voters are the principal, and we, as their representatives, are the agents charged with translating their preferences into policies to advance our nation and the state of its affairs. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the Bahamas has been a parliamentary democracy for over 291 years, and it is the third oldest democracy in the Western Hemisphere. Elections are therefore a critical component of our democracy. On a daily basis, our administrations work relentlessly to deliver on its obligation and to work towards strengthening its institutions and priorities that permit service to the people that they were elected to serve. A critical function of any government is the enacting of laws to maintain peace, order, and good governance for citizens and country. Today's debate to amend the Parliamentary Elections Act fulfills one of our commitments to the Bahamian people, to promote open, free, and fair elections. Mr. Speaker, in this vein, this bill seeks primarily to establish a continuous register of voters using as its core the register in being at the commencement of these provisions, namely the 2017 register. To complement new voters, and transfer will be added, and for which deceased voters and others who cease to be qualified to remain on the register will be removed. This now means that the Bahamas joins more than 16 Commonwealth nations who have moved away from a quinquennial register to a continuous register. Notably, some of the countries with a continuous register include some in our region, Jamaica and Barbados, and outside Canada, the Republic of Ireland, and Africa and South Africa. Mr. Speaker, the amendments reflect that the genesis of the continuous register, or the foundation of the continuous register, is the register established during 2017, which has a core of over 187,000 registrants. Mr. Speaker, to establish the continuous register requires amendments to Section 13 of the Principal Act, which is to be repealed and replaced. At present, Section 13 mandates the preparation of a register of voters, which is to be revised and amended continuously. Mr. Speaker, the present register, however, is a quinquennial register that, pursuant to Section 14, expires at the end of each succeeding period of 5 years, next following the date of it coming into force. The replacement register incorporates all voters on the current register, which is the 2017 register, and will be amended to include, as noted, new voters and transfers, and will be revised to remove dead voters, persons incarcerated, and those not qualified to be on the register. Mr. Speaker, while concrete actions regarding the change has long been discussed by successive governments in different forums, the current reality is that the global pandemic has quickened the pace and has forced us to this inevitable. This change will eliminate the need for long lines and reduce the cost of registering the same persons every 5 years. Shorter lines mean better adherence to social distances as recommended by the World Health Organization and other leading scientists, and a decrease in the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Less expense means more funds to achieve other national goals for our people, which has never been so important. Mr. Speaker, to complement the establishment of a continuous register, Section 13.2 makes provisions for all registered voters on the current list to remain registered on the continuous register and automatically eligible to vote in an election. Let me repeat that again. Mr. Speaker, to complement the establishment of a continuous register, Section 13.2 makes provisions for all registered voters on the current list to remain registered on the continuous register and automatically eligible to vote in an election. The continuous register acknowledges the rights of all eligible persons to fully and freely exercise their choice in our democracy, and will require the same diligence and vigilance of all concerned as in the case of a quinquennial register. The new provisions for Section 13 reenact the provisions which empower the Parliamentary Commissioner to remove the names from the register of any of the following: persons who are dead, those ceasing to be entitled to be registered under Section 8.1, those suffering from legally incapacity and not entitled to be registered as stipulated in Section 10.2, and those not found to be entitled to register or to be retained on the register upon a revision under Section 22. Those having objections to their registration under Section 23, those removed from the register of voters under Section 94, and those otherwise disqualified from registration as a voter under this Act. Mr. Speaker, Section 13, subsection 3A, mandates that the Parliamentary Commissioner, on a continuing basis, to register newly qualified registrants in accordance with Section 18.1 and 19. This is significant to the maintenance of our democracy as a government, has an obligation to ensure new registrants exercise their civic duty, and they can rest assured they will be afforded every opportunity to do the same. New registrant, Mr. Speaker, on the continuous register will be issued new voters' cards and counterfoils. For those persons transferring to new constituencies or polling divisions, their voters' card will be amended to reflect the change. Mr. Speaker, Section 13, subsection 6, provides for all revisions and amendments to the register to be published in an addendum quarterly, mainly on March 31st, June 30th, and December 31st. These quarterly updates and revisions of the register will be incorporated and published in accordance with the provisions of Section 25. Mr. Speaker, these essential changes that I submit achieve the main objectives of voters' registration, namely to ensure that every person eligible to vote has an equal opportunity to register to vote. This fundamental right of our citizens is paramount and will be preserved and protected at all costs. We are satisfied that the establishment of the continuous register preserves and protects this right. I again emphasize that the new amendments will provide every opportunity for voters to register and will make the necessary changes to ensure that their vote is counted. For the Parliamentary Commissioner, the new amendments will facilitate technical processes to ensure standardized processes with adequate opportunities to allow for voter engagement. Similar to the existing duties of the Parliamentary Commissioner, which ensures the smooth and efficient administration of the electoral process that we enjoy and will continue to do so in the future. Mr. Speaker, the new amendments require the renumbering of Section 13A and 13B of the Principal Act as Section 13C and 13D respectively. The new 13A mandates reporting obligations by the Registrar General to the Parliamentary Commissioner. The information to be submitted will include the names, date of birth, and death, along with the addresses and occupations of all persons aged 18 years and over who died within the specified period. Notwithstanding the above obligation, Section 13A makes provisions for the Parliamentary Commissioner to access the register of births and deaths kept by the Registrar General. Subsection 2 requires all undertakers, morticians, and directors of funeral services or homes, at the end of each month to submit to the Parliamentary Commissioner a list of persons whom they buried during the preceding month according to their names, date of birth, and death, addresses, and occupation. Mr. Speaker, subsection 4 and 5 of Section 13A also require reporting every 3 months. The former subsection 4 requires the Director of National Insurance to submit to the Parliamentary Commissioner a list of deceased persons in respect of whom death benefits have been claimed under the National Insurance Act. The latter, subsection 5, requires the Commissioner of Correction to report to the Parliamentary Commissioner the names, addresses, and dates of birth of all adult convicted persons serving terms of imprisonment or under a sentence of death. So this is all in an effort, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we have a register that is clean. And so we are making these amendments to move to that end. Mr. Speaker, in proposing the new amendment, our administration engaged in stakeholder discussion. The reason for doing so was to ensure that all stakeholders had an opportunity to voice any concerns and make any suggestions concerning the proposed course of action. From those meetings, we gained an awareness, an appreciation for the challenges, and we took a holistic approach to drafting this bill. The central reporting of all deaths and the reporting of incarcerated persons allow for assessment and analysis of the data, increasing the credibility and the integrity of the continuous register, which is important and critical to all of us. The insertions of Section 13B mandates that the Parliamentary Commissioner to investigate, verify, and remove the dead and persons imprisoned from the register. It also provides that if a writ of election is issued within 90 days of the list being received, the Commissioner is required to make notation next to the individual's name. This will be a better use of resources and efforts, as it will facilitate credible efforts to ensure that the register is purged on a regular basis. Our aim is to make certain this register or the next register would be more credible than before, ever before. Ever being mindful of the possibility of fraud, we considered all options possible. Mr. Speaker, an amendment is also being made to Section 14 of the Principal Act and is being substituted for Section 14, subsection 1, which ensures that all voters' cards and corresponding counterfoils prepared and issued in connection with the current register will continue to be valid after the commencement of this act. Simply put, Mr. Speaker, all voters' cards issued for the 2017 election are still good and should not be destroyed or disposed of. Mr. Speaker, according to the Parliamentary Commissioner, it is projected that no more than 20,000 new voters will be added to the register. As noted previously, for those persons transferring to new polling divisions or constituencies, their voters' card will remain valid and amended to reflect the change of address under Section 20. Voters who have lost or misplaced their voters' card can be issued a new voters' card. This will be easily facilitated since the Parliamentary Registration Office secures counterfoils for all voters' cards. Mr. Speaker, the new Section 14, subsection 3 will allow for the introduction of biometric permanent voters' card in the future to replace paper voters' card and counterfoil as currently noted in subsections 1 and 2. Though biometric technology will be introduced at a later time, its capabilities are worth mentioning. The new technology will facilitate the measurements and analysis of unique physical or behavioral characteristics as means of verifying and identifying individuals registering to vote. There will be a variety of biometric characteristics that will be capable of being measured, including fingerprints, retina, and iris scans. Mr. Speaker, with this technology, the Parliamentary Registration Department will capture data and compare it to previously captured and confirmed biometric features of an individual. In the current registration process, known as a one-to-one comparison, an officer of the Parliamentary Registration Department has to determine whether the individual is indeed who they claim to be. Mr. Speaker, in a biometric identification system, the individual does not need to claim an identity. His or her biometric features will be captured and compared to the features of all previously captured biometric features stored in a biometric database. Mr. Speaker, this technology will serve to reduce identity theft, multiple voting, as it will be used at polling stations to confirm the identity and eligibility of voters. Mr. Speaker, this issue was raised during our extensive stakeholder meeting. And while we are exploring this process for the future, we felt it necessary to include it so that the legislation framework is available for the appropriate introduction. Mr. Speaker, our administration will continue to be transparent with all stakeholders in the electoral process, from inception to implementation to the new provision. Transparency is key and will eliminate misperceptions regarding the introduction of a continuous register. Mr. Speaker, Section 18 of the Principal Act is being amended to delete subsection 1 and replacing it with a provisions to allow new registrants to register in the polling division in which they reside. The only exception will be for persons mentioned in section 15(8), namely persons qualified to register at an embassy, high commission, or other foreign missions of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, a new section 20 entitled Procedure on Application for Transfer of Registration requires a revising officer responsible for transferring any voter to a new polling division in the continuous register via Section 20, subsection 1A, to produce the voter's card, to take and subscribe an oath, to produce credible evidence to prove his or her qualifications. Subsection 1B allows the revising officer to verify the person. Subsection 1C allows the revising officer to make the necessary alterations or corrections in the person's voter's card and the corresponding counterfoil, and require the voter's signature or mark, and to annex his own signature to the alteration or correction, to both the card and the counterfoil. And subsection 1D allows the revising officer to alter or correct any parts of the register accordingly. Mr. Speaker, I am compelled to address concerns about integrity regarding proposed amendments to the Parliamentary Elections Act to establish a continuous register. The existing register and the amendments are replete with provisions which require continuous enumeration and review of the register by the Parliamentary Commissioner. Consequently, the integrity of the continuous register will be preserved as was the integrity of the quinquennial register by these statutory checks and balances and by the vigilance of all stakeholders. If processes are diligently followed and stakeholders remain vigilant, voter fraud will be kept to a minimum. Mr. Speaker, subsection 22 of the Principal Act, as amended, requires deleting subsection 4 simultaneously. Section 25 of the Principal Act is amended by deleting subsection 1 and substituting it with a provision which requires the Parliamentary Commissioner to make available all parts of the register for all constituencies in the Bahamas to reflect alterations, additions, and/or deletions on the 14th day in the last month during each quarter of the year, as laid out in Section 13 of the island of New Providence, for the island of New Providence, to complement and ensure full disclosure for the entire Bahamas. Subsections 1 and 2 of Section 25 will apply. However, subsection 3 requires the Parliamentary Commissioner to have available for inspection the register by the 21st day in the last month of each quarter for the Family Islands. Mr. Speaker, Section 27 of the Principal Act is repealed to replace a provision which eliminates the corrected register, which previously replaced the register following a report of the Boundaries Commission. The new section requires all alterations, revisions, or corrections by the Boundaries Commissions after review of Article 77 to be made in the continuous register. The new section also provides that the alterations, revisions, or corrections made as a result of the Boundary Commission's report shall continue to form a part of the continuous register unless revoked and replaced by a new order under Article 77, or, of course, boundaries are designed to ensure there is equal balance in the constituency sizes. Mr. Speaker, while there are some challenges as it relates to reflecting where everyone lives, we still have a constitutional and moral obligation to ensure that our communities are fairly represented in Parliament. Mr. Speaker, paragraph 7 of Article 70 of the Constitution allows for new constituencies to be established and boundaries for constituencies altered, along with complementing new polling divisions to be established or the boundaries of polling divisions altered. In other words, Section 27, subsection 1 requires the Parliamentary Commissioner to make the necessary alteration or corrections to the continuous register of voters where the Boundaries Commission makes alterations, revisions, or corrections to boundaries, pursuing to paragraph 7 of Article 70 or of the Constitution, unless revoked by a succeeding Boundaries Commission order. Mr. Speaker, subsection 2 of the same requires the altered register to become the new register and valid for all subsequent elections, unless those alterations, revisions, or corrections are revoked and replaced by a new order pursuing to paragraph 7 of Article 70 of the Constitution. To avoid duplication, subsection 3 of the same amendment does not require a registered voter to register for any reason associated with the alteration, revision, or corrections of constituencies, boundaries, or new polling division. Mr. Speaker, subsection 4 of Amendment 27 allows the Parliamentary Commissioner to make additions, deletions, alterations, or corrections to the register for persons registering or transferring from constituencies or polling divisions to which any other under paragraph 7 of Article 70 or of the Constitution relates. Subsection 5, Mr. Speaker, allows the Parliamentary Commissioner to duplicate the same alterations or corrections to the counterfoils of the voter's card for persons requiring alterations or corrections in the register pursuing to subsection 1. Mr. Speaker, ensuring checks and balances. Subsection 6 allows the Parliamentary Commissioner to publish a notice in at least 2 local newspapers for a minimum of 3 consecutive issues on New Providence or utilize additional platforms. The objective is to request all persons affected by the alterations or corrections to visit his office or other places as specified with their voter's card so that they can be altered or corrected in conformity with the alterations or corrections made to the corresponding counterfoils. All those affected by these changes are required to provide a signature or mark to the alterations or corrections in the counterfoil. Mr. Speaker, subsection 7 of the amendment to section 27 provides that on the dissolution of the House of Assembly, as outlined in paragraph 7 of Article 70 of the Constitution, the voters' registers as created under provisions of section 13, along with all alterations or corrections made under this section, will continue to serve as the register of voters for the purposes of this act. Mr. Speaker, of the more than 187,000 persons registered in 2017, there were approximately 37,000 registered voters aged 65 or older. The amendment to Section 49C takes this into account in a COVID-19 environment. Let me repeat that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, of the 187,000 persons registered in 2017, out of that number, 37,000 registered voters were of age 65 and older. The amendments to Section 49C takes this into account in a COVID-19 environment. According to the World Health Organization, older persons and those with underlying health conditions are most vulnerable during this pandemic. Indeed, persons aged 65 years or older represent 80% of the hospitalization worldwide and have a 23-fold greater risk of death than those under 65. So you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, if I take that 37,000 persons or voters age 65 and above, and then I add those with pre-existing illnesses to that, then the number increases exponentially. So hence one of the reasons for our government moving in this direction. With this in mind, Mr. Speaker, our administration thought it necessary to ensure this vulnerable group be provided with special accommodations. The amendments insert a new paragraph in Section 49C, which allows registered voters who are aged 65 years and older on an appointment day for taking of the poll to vote as special voters in the advance poll under Section 54. Let me repeat that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the amendment inserts a new paragraph in Section 49C(1), which allows registered voters who are aged 65 years and over to be classified as special voters in the advance poll, and they can vote under Section 54. Mr. Speaker, as you have heard, our administration is making the necessary amendments to ensure that our senior citizens are afforded every opportunity to remain safe, especially during this pandemic, while executing or exercising their constitutional right to vote. Mr. Speaker, the main objective of voters' registration is to determine eligibility to vote. And all governments have a responsibility to ensure all persons eligible to vote. This is exactly what this minister-led administration is doing. We are mindful that election fraud is real. And despite our new policies and procedures, we know that some people will still try to beat the system. But Mr. Speaker, I stand here before you to say that it is our intentions to ensure that we take every measure and every effort, and we are doing so, to ensure that any register from this moment on will be cleansed from those who seek to commit fraud. Mr. Speaker, for this reason, we have made an amendment to Section 94 of the Principal Act by inserting subsection 2, which gives the Parliamentary, the Commissioner, the ability to remove from the voters' register any person who secured his registration on the register of voters by committing an offense under Section 1A, B, or C, and has been convicted of any such offense. And it further provides for the removal of any person from the register if that person is considered aiding and abetting another individual in a crime under subsection 1A, B, or C, and C, who is convicted of an offense under subsection 1D. Mr. Speaker, such election offenses include, inter alia, making false statements for the purpose of registering as a voter or securing the registration of another person, making application as some other person, whether living, dead, or fictitious, for the registration of that person as a voter, and procuring the registration of him or herself or of some other person as a voter in any constituency, knowing the person is not entitled to be so registered. A provision is added to allow the removal of a person's registration if convicted of any of these offenses. Mr. Speaker, the final amendment of the Principal Act will be to Section 113 by deleting subparagraphs D and E and the substituting of the following paragraph D, which prescribes to the use of biometric data cards for use as permanent voters' cards to replace paper voters' cards and counterfeit. Oh, this has been long overdue. And there has been a lot of talk over the years about this transformation. But Mr. Speaker, I am here today to tell you that this is a government that delivers, and we are delivering. This will then make provisions which allows the minister to one, make regulations for prescribing biometric data cards for use, make regulations for prescribing the method for reading, assessing, and recording any of the biometric data be contained in the biometric permanent voter's card. And Mr. Speaker, I must say during the consultation, this was something that many of the people that we would have met with, they have been clamoring for. And as a government, we actually said that we would deliver on it. And now, hence, the process is in swing. Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Commissioner vouches for the integrity of the existing register, and that 97% of the registrants have used some form of acceptable document to prove their qualification to register, of which 85% used passports. Moreover, he indicates there was a dearth of objections to the 2017 register since it was created, and consequently, there should be few concerns about the integrity of the current register as the core of the continuous register. Further, Mr. Speaker, there are no constitutional issues, as Article 46 is very transparent. In accordance with the Constitution, it permits members of whom have been elected by the people to make provisions for the manner in which such persons are elected. The Bahamas has and will continue to maintain the integrity of its electoral processes, in which participation in voters' exercise is 89%. That's according to the Parliamentary Commissioner during 2020, which is phenomenal. For this exercise, Mr. Speaker, there were 6 stakeholders meeting. These included meetings with the Bar Association, the Bahamas Christian Council, Progressive Liberal Party, the Democratic Alliance, independent parliamentarians, and civil society. Approximately 61 persons participated in the discussion on many of the amendments that have been outlined, including the reality of voters' registration and voting in a COVID-19 environment, particularly for our seniors, registration fraud, transfer of registrants, taking an oath, increasing voters' credibility using biometrics, checks and balances through enumeration and investigations by the Parliamentary Commissioner, and the removal of dead registrants and persons' legal capacity to register. Mr. Speaker, the accuracy of the voter registration process is a key element in ensuring that equal and equitable opportunities and processes exist for all qualified registrants. I believe that the new provisions will be universally supported so that every eligible citizen wanting to register may do so. Historically, Mr. Speaker, we continue to value our ability to choose our government and pride ourselves in having a say in what goes on in our nation. Today's amendments serve to strengthen the institution of the Parliamentary Registration Department and the people of this nation by improving the processes by which they can effectively and efficiently participate in government. Mr. Speaker, let it be known that I propose, Mount Moriah proposed and support the Parliamentary Elections Amendment Bill 2020. It will be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, before I conclude, that I would like to take this opportunity to extend Congratulations to two of my colleagues. First, I would like to extend well wishes to the Honorable Desmond Bannister, who has been appointed to Deputy Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Brother Bannister, I wish you well. I know those of my colleagues will also have their say. And second, I extend the same wishes to the Honorable Kwesi Thompson, who has been appointed Minister of State for Finance. Both men have proven themselves competent to serve the Bahamian people. And I am certain that they will both advance and continue to advance the mandates of their office and this government and our people. May God bless the Commonwealth of Bahama.
Is there a seconder? Chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I would like to begin where my illustrious colleague ended, and that is by first recognizing the contribution of East Grand Bahama, a man that I respect, admire, care for. I don't always say this, but if you all understand when I say I love it. Yes, your contributions and deputy leader of our great party. I've learned so much from you. Many don't know that the night when the telephone call was made for me to go and debate a wonderful gentleman, I spoke to you. I called you and I spoke to you about the debate, and you said to me, you said, listen, he's a bully. Go hard or go home. And so I want to thank you for all that you've done and you continue to do for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It would be remiss of me if I did not extend congratulations to Mr. Desmond Bannister, another gentleman that I respect and admire. I'm his constituent and one of his generals. And I want to congratulate him on being appointed Deputy Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I also would like to thank Mr. Kwesi Thompson, who was recently appointed Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance. I know that both gentlemen, having regard to their history, shall do a phenomenal job in the service to our beloved Bahama land. Mr. Speaker, I would like to begin my presentation today by quoting from a decision by the now Dame Anita Allen, and she was at that time Senior Justice in the matter of Leo Brian Pinder and others. And I see a gentleman that I respect and admire who's sitting here today, who was a part of that case. And since we're dealing with the highest form of, and I would like to acknowledge him, Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, and yes, my cousin, and the other attorneys, brilliant attorneys who appeared in that matter. And Dame Anita Allen, supported by the then Senior Justice John Isaac, now Justice of the Court of Appeal, made mention of a fact about the right of protecting the highest form of enfranchisement in the Bahamas, and that is the right to vote. And he said, the courts now scrupulously and jealously protect the universality of the right to vote and guard against the unnecessary disenfranchisement of voters. This is so because the right to vote is so crucial to the proper functioning of the parliamentary democracy. Fundamental. And as I start to do my research this week and I look through the Constitution on the significance of voting, I discovered in Article 54 that almost in everything that we do, because we are a country of laws, is enshrined the right of the voter to participate in the governance of this country. So every article of the Constitution, after there would have been deliberation in the House of Assembly, you have to go to the qualified voters to get their views. And we've seen that in any number of referendums that we've had. So if you want to change the fundamental right provision, if you want to change the provisions in terms of how we select the Governor General, cabinet ministers, member of parliament, the Constitution on how we look at the court, you have to go back to what the Constitution identifies as the final arbiters of the matter, and that is the people. Even in terms of us being here for 5 years, the final arbiter as to whether or not, and every time I come to this house, Mr. Speaker, unless I'm rushing, I stop and I take a look at all of the pictures and I think about those persons who have been here, some of whom I can't remember. And I refresh myself with the knowledge that attrition will occur, whether it be by death. Some of us will option out. But for the discussion that, or the debate that we're having today, the people will make that decision. And it's the most fundamental, basic, and important right. So I want to congratulate, and I will congratulate her again, and I will read it, Mr. Speaker, again, that when it says that the court...
Honorable member, do you have the citation? So you can read that into the record.
Mr. Speaker. At the end, I intend to lay it. You want me to do it now, sir?
You can do it now and then lay it later.
Okay. It is, the year is 2010, number 00221. And it's in the matter of the Parliamentary Elections Act. And I will read it again, Mr. Speaker. The courts, that fundamental right that is enshrined in the very fabric of our nation, every aspect of our nation, the courts now scrupulously and jealously protects the universality of the right to vote and guard against the unnecessary disenfranchisement of voters. This is so because the right to vote is so crucial to the proper functioning of a parliamentary democracy. Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I would just like to make mention of a few matters, Mr. Speaker. I would like to extend condolences to Mr. Ramon Ferreira, my colleague and friend, on the passing of his beloved son. I visited with him, Mr. Speaker, and as at these times, there's absolutely no explanation. As I stood there with him, I had no words to say. And it reminded me of when Job's friends came. There's very little they could say about his disposition. And a number of colleagues was calling Exuma, and everybody was sending out their condolences. Because I remember when I walked in the community, the brilliant, beautiful young boy would come to the gate to greet me. And so it was very little I could say. But to quote the scripture, that God gives, God takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And so the prayers, I'm quite certain of all of our colleagues here, my family from Cat Island, Dowd Cat Island, all the ladies send their regards to let you know that we're praying for you. We love you and your family. And we pray that God will continue to be with you and your family during this time of your bereavement. I would also like to send condolences out to another colleague, Mr. Michael Pentad, on the passing of his brother, my cousin, and Sister Laura Benson's son. Ronald Rollins, who passed, I think, a week or so ago. And so condolences are extended to him. Mr. Speaker, as I said about what we're debating here, and I'm going to just stay with the case because I want to commend my colleague who began this debate for his comprehensive analysis of the legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, even in the comprehensive analysis of the legislation, there are some fact patterns that we identify in voting. You hear a person say they cut the boundaries down the middle of my bed. My husband was in one constituency and my wife was in one constituency. Persons turn up in the case that Cat Island, Rumkins, and Salvador was involved in, where without a voter's card and with a driver's license, and the court decided that because of how serious and how important the right is to vote, after looking at all of the circumstances, the court gave that lady the right to vote. Persons turned up to the voters registry with different date of birth. And you had to look at, there was objections. They voted in a certain manner as prescribed by the law, and the court had to look at that. Then we know a person who voted. Dead person was discovered to have voted in election. Pardon me? I remember when I was in Cat Island once. But I know what he does. I want people at home to know that my cousin asked me if I saw the dead people vote. When I was in Cat Island once, and that's why I said when we're training, right? I print everything. I said, make sure count the ballots. Great God from Zion. When we was counting them ballots, somebody already marked an X before we started. I'll never forget that one. Because he said that for that. I thought he would say, who did that I need to know, so he could report them to the police. Man, if you see him, he just rub his chin. Oh, I love him. Yes. So there are many situations and circumstances that arise that would seek to disenfranchise persons from voting. And I deliberately highlighted some of them. And we know by our exercise when we go in, it's very tense on that day. And nothing is allowed to pass. And this is the reason for the amendment to the present bill, to the Parliamentary Amendments Bill 2020, to resolve and remove a lot of these issues that would cause someone not to be able to participate in the highest form of when we look at the freedom of conscience and the freedom of expression, the freedom of movement. Because voting is so critical. Not only voting for an election, you're called upon, the voters registry is used when we have local government elections. Then it's also used when we're doing referendums. And it's also used in terms of an assessment when the police are doing their investigation. So it's critical that you have a list that is transparent, that is certain, and that is honest. And after going through some of the difficulties that people express, Dame Anita Allen in section 67, and I think this is critically important to what we're doing and what the minister and his team are attempting to do. This again, in this process has exposed failures, omissions, and errors on the part of the Parliamentary Commission and its staff, which may, if not corrected, threaten the fairness of electoral processes and ultimately our democracy. When elections go wrong in certain countries, it could end bad. And I thank God that He's blessed us with the temperance, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that even when things we think don't go right, we can have a discussion on exchange, as you see, between Cat Island and I, because we know each other. And so that's what she said. It threatens the actual stability of a democracy. And she goes on to say, it is not an answer to say that the parliamentary commissioner did not have resources to do what is mandated by the law to do. No court can accept that as an explanation for disenfranchisement of a voter. That's how fundamental it is. Sometimes we saw a matter came down to 3 votes. In this case, with Mr. Pinder, it was 2 votes. Came down to 2 votes. And we've found in certain circumstances, the minister, my colleague, identified the whole issue of fraud. I will go through the listing, but I just want viewers at home to get an appreciation on what we're trying to do here today. We say emphatically that the parliamentary commissioner must be provided with sufficient resources, both financial and human, to ensure that he is able to properly discharge the duties imposed by law. Mr. Speaker, I would like to commend the parliamentary commissioner and his team for their invaluable work and what they're doing, and for their contribution to the Parliamentary Elections Act. It would be remiss of me if I don't highlight the minister and identify his agitation for the passing of this bill. And mostly, Mr. Speaker, I mean to do this. Sometimes we come and we tout the successes of the government. The recent legislation that we have put before the House and the vast consultation that we've done. When we wisely listened to the voices of the judiciary, and we laid the bill, the Court Services Bill, but not only that, we passed the amendment to the Bail Act, which Justice Isaac says caused a lot of contention. We benefited 2 very large groups in the community, the prison and the defense force, and now we're passing the parliamentary amendment to the elections bill. And these are being done under the leadership of the Most Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnick. A man, and I start this weekend, and anytime somebody calls him a dictator, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to rise to rebut it. Because I looked at what a dictator is. I sat and I heard the Prime Minister invite. Well, you're so vain. You think every song is about you. You were not even in my mind. Satan, get behind me. But, Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of the pandemic, he's done a lot. And so I just wanted to highlight that what we're doing here today is being done under us. I want to thank Dame Anita Allen, now Commissioner of Law Reform, Ms. Tina Roy and her team, who works extremely hard from administration to administration, and nobody could call their integrity into question. So I want to commend Ms. Tina Roy and her group for the work that they've done. I would like also, Mr. Speaker, to commend the collaboration and the comparative analysis that was done to bring this legislation to fore. A legislation which, in borrowing the words of Dame Anita Allen, is another attempt to ensure that we safeguard this constitutional democracy and make it safe for all who live and reside. A continuous register, Mr. Speaker, is fundamental. And I deliberately highlighted all of the scenarios that I highlighted. For instance, I did a case in Andros once. And persons who were supposed to be in Nassau as an Andros, and some persons taking the plane to go to another island to vote, and then persons voting early. And these things happen and going elsewhere. Because, we're now undergoing a process in immigration. We discovered that when you do things by paper, it slows you down by 50%. And when you have to cross-reference using paper and not technology, it adds another 10, 12% to it. And the accuracy of the assessment is lost. Because you know very well, files can go missing, papers could go missing, things don't turn up. someone decide that they're not well and they may really not be well. And all of that affects it. But the total digitization of the voting process is fundamental to guaranteeing some degree of certainty in the system. So, Mr. Speaker, Section 13 of the bill seeks to make a continuous register, Mr. Speaker. And all persons who are presently registered under the Act will continue to be registered. And it also creates a cleansing, Mr. Speaker, and for myself and for persons viewing and to help the debate, I crave your indulgence to read Section 13.2. Says a person registers as a voter entitled to vote at an election on the current register shall remain registered as a voter entitled to vote at an election on the continuous register unless his name is removed from the register by the Parliamentary Commissioner, where the Parliamentary Commissioner determines that since publication of the current register, such person has died. And yes, dead persons have turned up. I haven't seen them. Has ceased to be entitled to be registered under the section. Some persons may go to prison. There may be other reasons why they can't do it. Is deemed to be suffering from a legal incapacity and is not entitled to be registered. And then, Mr. Speaker, I heard Minister Dane spoke about, and I'll get to it later, about creating in the process a special provision for persons over 65 to vote at a special time. Our seniors, Mr. Speaker, but I'm advised, and it's a good suggestion, that the elderly should be added. The elderly shouldn't be on the same line, jostling, just the disabled, jostling to vote. They should be voting in that pre-voting process when the police officers and other persons go to vote. So I think this is an excellent suggestion, Mr. Speaker. Or a person is found not to be entitled to be registered to vote, has had an objection to his registration as a voter allowed under Section 23, is removed from the register of voters under Section 94 for fraud or whatever have you, is otherwise disqualified from voting, Mr. Speaker. The provision goes on to speak that the Parliamentary Commissioner shall on a continuous basis register or cause to be registered on the continuous register any person not registered as a voter who wishes to be registered and is qualified to vote. It also allows the register to be adjusted for persons who are transferred in, Mr. Speaker, because there's a necessity as time goes on. Persons move from different locations to other locations, and some of the scenarios that I gave, one of them was that a lady it was in Yamacraw because the case took place in Elizabeth. Persons moved from one apartment to the next. It gives the register. I see Dr. Sands look up. Every time I walk down Commonwealth Boulevard, you remember Commander. He tells me about it. But persons moving from one apartment to the next, and it's necessary, Mr. Speaker, having regard to, sometimes you sit with a register and you're looking to see who lives where, who moved where. And in certain circumstances, you found, not in all the cases, that there's persons are attempting to commit a fraud. So you see the certainty with which these amendments are attempting to bring. Mr. Speaker, the Section 6, I'm going to go to the main section, provide for the duty, which amends Section 13A, the duty to provide statistics to the Parliamentary Commissioner. And so the Registrar General, Mr. Speaker, under this Act, has a fundamental duty to provide birth certificates, death certificates, basically everything that would determine where someone lives or the validity of someone in the Bahamas. And now the Immigration Department is working very closely with the Parliamentary Secretary, with the Registrar General Department. We are finding some very interesting information out about some persons that will also affect the voters registry, the Director of National Insurance has a responsibility under this act to collaborate with the Parliamentary Commissioner to assist him in bringing regularity and certainty to the register. The Commissioner of the Commissioner of Corrections, because under this bill it speaks to persons who may be incarcerated and may not have the right to work, to vote. And so he would give the information that he has, like the length of time that the person has been incarcerated for, whether or not you may want to check the person is actually in the facility or they've been released. And so when persons could be on work release. Well, on election, you shouldn't be on work release. But persons can attempt to do certain things that may corrupt the voters' registry. And that is something, Mr. Speaker, that we're attempting to do. Voters' cards and counterfoil issued on the register, in the current register, to remain valid. So all those voters' cards that you have, they remain valid. And I like what the my colleague said earlier, they're going to be digitized. Speaker, that's fundamental. Sometimes you get voters' cards, you don't know if someone has written on them or something is being taken off from them. Then there's the general registry of the voters' card, so that you could know if someone, let's say someone turns up to vote and if everything is properly digitized, you can look in the system quickly and efficiently, and you can pull up a copy of the voter's card with the picture and all those different things and the biometrics to see that this person is actually who they say they are. And so, Mr. Speaker, that is fundamental to securing what the courts have determined to bring in some degree of certainty and regularity in what we're attempting to do. Any person wishing to be registered as a voter, being a person whose name has not at the time being included in the current register or the continuous register, shall apply for registration in the polling division in which he is ordinarily voted. So if you're wishing to register, you can apply to be registered as a voter. Mr. Speaker, now turn your attention to the procedure on application for transfers. And so automatically, Mr. Speaker, the section says the revising officer, before transferring the registration as a voter in any polling division, any person who was formally registered as a voter in the current register and as a voter in the continuous register shall require that person to produce their voter's card. So there's some information you'd have to produce to him if you want to be transferred, Mr. Speaker. I now turn your attention to Section 27, correction of the register following a boundary, correction of the register following review of the boundaries of constituencies under Article 77. So as we very well know, we're going into that process very shortly. I think we've already appointed the Boundaries Commission, and they will be looking at the number of voters in the constituency and determining the boundaries of a constituency or how many persons are there, and automatically the Parliamentary Commissioner can make that adjustment to Speaker without having persons to come, as the good minister explained. Not having, in the context of COVID-19, Mr. Speaker, is fundamental for that person attending the Parliamentary Registration Department. We see it. I had that experience. When you get there, everybody is at the Parliamentary Registration Department trying to get something. It would be phenomenal if this information is digitized, or if you can just, if they could send your, and we did it in the past, automatically just send you the register, the log of all the voters, you get it. You don't have to send, in the context of COVID-19, you don't have to send persons. And there's not that bungling up of persons at the registry, Mr. Speaker. I spoke to the intended amendment of 49C to allow persons, senior citizens to vote, and the disabled, persons with disabilities to be able to vote in the same fashion, and so that they are not caught up in the ruckus of voting. When you go on an election day, everybody is there. And I'm hoping that we can lock down on some of those libation establishments. They seem to have a lot of it. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to 94, which seeks to prevent fraud in the system, and all of these scenarios that I've given thus far, including when I saw for myself some of the tick to vote in the booklet. I saw that. I couldn't believe it. And then persons who may have passed, went their demise, seeing how they will not appear on the register. Mr. Speaker, also the concept of cards, digitized cards, and doing away with the counterfoil. You know, some persons have at least, you know, for the time that I've been voting, I have all my bogus cards. Now you can just have a card and you're registered for the rest of your life. And that collaboration between the different ministries, whether it be the Registrar General's Department, the police, or whatever have you, would cleanse the register, update the register to bring clarity, Mr. Speaker, in the process, and thereby, Mr. Speaker, ensuring one of the most basic fundamental rights that every Bahamian citizen has, and that is the right to vote. Not just to vote in an election, but to vote to determine the course in which our country will go when you look at the amendment to any of the provisions caught up under Article 54. Mr. Speaker, Yamacraw supports this amendment. I would just like to say one thing. We gave out our devices. I want to say something to some of my constituents, Mr. Speaker. On last week Friday, I had the delight of going to pass out meals to senior citizens, and I would advise my colleagues. I know it's rough, and sometimes you say you might be like me. You don't have no money in your pocket sometimes, and that's not really what it's about. But walk, meet the people. I met some phenomenal senior citizens who blessed me, Ms. Bain, look you in the eye, and gave me encouraging words. Yeah, there may be a few who may say they don't want to see you or whatever happens, but that's okay. But if you sit long enough with the person who say they don't want to see you, you can walk out of that yard having a laugh. So I encourage, well, not just the side, but the side officers to continue to visit with persons. I walked down Commonwealth Boulevard and there was some undertaking that I had made with a few of the constituents. And I want to say to them, when you tell people you can do something, try your best to do it. If you can't do it, let them know you can't do it. For those who I made some promises to, today is Monday, and it's my birthday. I am coming through to fulfill my promises. And so I thank God. I thank God for this opportunity. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I just sat, I was standing and thinking, I was thinking about my father. And it is sometimes we associate the things that we see in terms of the love or power of God, but that doesn't determine his love or power. But from a stevedore, a young man who left school, and then going on to be a joiner, and joining the Royal Bahamas Police Force, where I never made it from being a constable. And I just found my file a couple of days ago, last year. You know, pardon me? Stop being mischievous. My name is Ellsworth Johnson, but in this house, I'm Yamacraw. I should not speak. Mr. Speaker, I'm giving honor to God for his grace, kindness. I have 3 beautiful children. All of mine. Beautiful. I have a wife. I have a mother who contacted me this morning, an aunt that I grew up with, and a beautiful constituency and a lovely country, Mr. Speaker. And so I thank God for this opportunity to be here. And I give him praise. And I just ask that he will continue to grant me wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to do what is right in his sight, because he knows sometimes I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member, and happy birthday to you. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Parliamentary Elections Act. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member who spoke last, referred to a case.
Honorable member, just before you begin, honorable member for Yamakro, the document that you were going to table, order that the document be brought up.
What will they do?
Do you have it available?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to do it. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much. You know, I spoke in depth about the Constitution. And, you know, it would be remiss of me if I did not make mention of a phenomenal gentleman who is the father of Anglican and his role protecting the fundamental rights of individuals, and he's still subsisting with us. And so I extend congratulations and recognition to Mr. Adi Hanna Sr. and by extension a gentleman that I love, Adi Hanna Jr. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to just acknowledge once again the fine person for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, whose inspiring support continues to be the wind beneath my wing. And despite, despite what they say, if what the member for Yamakro is saying, he's speaking very poorly of our people. If he's correct and right in what he's saying, he's speaking very poorly of our people. Cat Island people, San Salvador people, they are discerning and they know what's best for them. And if someone is not doing something for them, they know how to deal with that too.
Honorable member,
So, Mr. Speaker,
the chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro on a point of order.
I was clear with what I said. We opened the package, and when we look in the package, because I could get him the name off the record. The package came. Cat Island had nothing to do with that package. You know, you go there and you open a package, and that's why in training, I would say to this side and that side, keep your eye on him. Look at it. Everybody knows about a floating ballot. Please don't get overly righteous today. And talk. What was that? What was the point of order? That introduces something called a floating ballot. No.
Honorable members.
I'm not speaking disparaging of you. The member sat down in his seat and said, I've never done anything for Cat Island. He ain't laid no pipe, he ain't do this. And I'm just saying to him, what I told him, Mr. Speaker, if he believes that the Cat Island people...
Honorable member.
I say he's disparaging the Cat Island people by saying to them that they know what they're doing by voting for me. Because I have not been doing anything for them.
Two members cannot be on your feet at the same time. Honorable member for Yamakro. Honorable member for Yamakro. Honorable member for Yamakro. Resume your seat, please.
Listen, I got some I can do in the next one. I put together and I haven't done.
Honorable member for Yamakro. Honorable. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
See, if the member will take the opportunity, I'm not hurt at all. Right? The truth is in the pudding. Taste it. Taste it. That's why I'm here. And I continue to be here. Right? I continue to be here. So, Mr. Speaker, I continue to be here. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member for Yamakro.
Man, listen, all the jobs, you're looking for another job? You're still auditioning here. Looking for another job. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Yamakro. Resume your seat, honorable member.
It's okay. Me? No. Listen, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. Protect me?
I need no protection, man. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Cat Island.
I'm not here to engage in any frivolity, because I was about to say it. Let me just leave that alone, because he has something to prove to some people. I don't know what it is, but I'll leave that alone. Well, Speaker, you know, the member drew attention to a case that I was involved with, and in fact, I suspect if you go and read most of the election court cases in this country, you'd note that I was involved in most of them, right? I want him to, one thing he should have said is that I was there championing the cause of voters' rights. And the other side wasn't quite embracing the right of the Bahamians to vote and to exercise so I'm just saying, my side was championing. My side was championing.
Honorable members.
Come on, Andre. Let them on speak first. You know what you're talking about. I know like all the people walking around on you.
Mr. Speaker, we, you know, what is concerning to me, before I embark on the bill, which I would wish to invite
honorable members, the member for Cat Island has the floor.
Which I'll invite the government to seriously consider. You see, as was pointed out in the same case that was laid, right? We can pass laws to almost address all the mischiefs that we can think of, and all the provisions could be in that law. But at the end of the day, it is not what we pass here, what is made law, but the character of those persons who are entrusted with the duty and obligations to ensure that those laws are carried out. And that therein lies a lot of the challenge. And you would find that in the case he cited, for example, right, the commissioner, the Parliamentary commissioner, was criticized by the judge because of the failures and the omissions and commissions, despite the fact that issues were raised with him and to him. And so, very often, the political directorate are blamed for what goes on. But those of us who've been around long enough will appreciate that more often than not, it's those who might be around us who are charged with the responsibility to carry out the laws. For example, the Constituency Boundaries Commission are charged with a solemn duty under the Constitution. And that's where it all starts. It starts by how the country is to be subdivided into constituencies. That is enjoined by the Constitution to be looked at by the Constitutional Review Commission, the Constituency's Boundaries Commission, who then will make a report to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, in his own deliberate judgment, could amend or alter that report before it goes to the Governor General. And that is a key element in our democracy. What is going to be recommended by the Constituency Commission, how that recommendation could be or not altered by the Prime Minister, and that the Constitution gives him full authority on that issue. Because, huh? So, yeah, right. So, and that the duty, the job of the mandate of the Constitution is informed by, more often than not, the register of voters, determine how voters have to be placed. Because, for example, if you look at the present register, you'll find that in your Providence, you have one constituency, you have close to 7,000 voters. No, that's Golden Eye. Let me tell you what you have. If you don't know yet, tell me. Kalani has close to, that was 6,500, and perhaps counting. Right? Golden Eye is counting to a very low of about 4,300. So you see the disparity. The duty of the Constitutional Commission is to see how they could eliminate that disparity, so that there could be, in each constituency, as near as possible, an equal number of voters. Very often, what happens is that you would strike a number because of the communities and the manner in which roads are drawn, the way settlements might be. You might decide, well, we cannot do it. We cannot put the same amount of voters in every constituency, but we do a range. Starts from 200, 300, 400, and past 500. The range. So you try not to have any one constituency that the disparity is, like in this instance, we are close to 2,000 and 3,000 on your property. You go to Grand Bahama, for example, where you have 5 constituencies. You have at least 3 of those 5 with more than 6,000 voters. And the other 2, I think, is just over 5,000. When you compare that to what's happening on New Providence, then the Constitutional Commission might ask itself, are we discharging our duty in looking at those and just leaving it as is? No, I didn't say anything like the setup. I'm just giving some observations. At least I'm saying at the end of the day, right? I'm saying at the end of the day, the political directorate very often is blamed for something, when in fact it ain't the political directorate. And I'm just pointing out some issues. Now, for example, the same judgment that was read speaks to the provision of resources. And they say, and the judgment says, which is correct, that the Parliamentary Commissioner cannot excuse himself from doing his duty because resources were not provided to him. Because it is fundamental for the government to provide resources necessary for the Parliamentary Commissioner and any statutory agent of the government to be able to carry out its mandatory duties. And so in this instance, for example, one of the aides, again, if you go back to if the Boundaries Commission was to meet at this time, first thing they look at to determine how constituencies may be redistributed. They'll go to what is called the register in being. Not the current register, but the register, it's called the register in being, which is being prepared by the Parliamentary Commissioner to replace the current register whenever it expired or brought to an end by an order of the Governor General. And the law mandates that register in being ought to have been started at least 1 year before the current register was to expire. This current register would be expiring subject to when these laws are enacted in July 2021. So registration for the registered being should have started in July, at least July of this year. And it wasn't. Right? I hear COVID, right? But how many? There were at least 5 general elections in the Caribbean, with COVID raging. Right? I mean, so I'm not saying that, right? What I'm saying is that what I'm saying though is this: is that we talk about COVID, right? Just as you express the view that you are protecting those over 65 by putting a provision, by amending the law to give a provision for special voting privileges, if I could call it that. You did that in response to what you perceived to be the problem with COVID. You could also do that in response to what you perceive. So, for example, instead of having 8 registration centers, which will attract a cluster, why not have 16? Or maybe 20? No, but you can still have to see. No, but it is not. No. But don't be carried away that the fact that you make this register permanent, that you're not going to attract crowds to register, because there are people to have to transfer, and you still have if things hold as they usually are, you have at least by now, let's say this year 3, year 4, you should have at least about 20 more thousand persons who put on the register. From students who would have turned 18, persons who have turned 18, you still have a number of persons who did not register. So you're not going to you will minimize them, but you're not going to eliminate it. So I'm just saying, don't get carried away that you're not going to have what you're trying to avoid. Clusters. Right. Right? No, I understand that. I'm just saying that perhaps you could consider more stations to spread the crowd out instead of just 2 or 5. Right? And so, I wish I was here. You're talking COVID. I wish I was here to talk about how we could provide some cash in Bahamians, emergencies, for Bahamians who are suffering today. Because right now, hunger and hardship is present in many homes in this country today. I wish I was here today to debate the best way to work with landlords and banks to help Bahamians stay in their homes. Because, Mr. Speaker, as you know, we are facing a very grim unemployment crisis, a crisis made worse by a gigantic second wave of thousands of COVID cases. And I say that was the result of a government not prepared when we reopened our borders on July 1st. Right? I wish we were here in Parliament to pass new legislation to support small businesses who have been hurt by the lockdowns and curfews that followed that second wave. Getting economic relief to Bahamians who are hurting seems to me to be a matter of most urgency. Instead, however, we are here to debate the establishment of a permanent register. Yeah, permanent register. That's it. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. We support the introduction of a permanent register. And I could say that having been involved in electoral processes, both campaigning and as a lawyer and in election court, both in this jurisdiction and in other jurisdictions. I've been an advocate for the permanent register for quite some time. Right? Anything, Mr. Speaker, that makes it easier for Bahamians to vote has to be a welcome development. But such a major change in the exercise of our democracy must be done properly. Above all, The Bahamian people need to understand why this change will benefit them, why we in this House support this change, and appreciate the implications it carries. Mr. Speaker, we do not understand the government's take, but they know why. The Prime Minister, of course, reminded us that the elections are not due right now. Right? Moving to a permanent register should not be controversial, but it must be managed well and transparently so that Bahamians can feel they trust that their interests are being looked out for. Speaker, I think you may understand what I mean when I say that Bahamians have this year been given some reason to wonder how deeply the member Kalani remains committed to our nation's democratic and representative institutions. At a time when the government's competence is regularly called into question, whether as it relates to the hurricane relief or the Grand Lucayan mess or the chaos of their COVID management, you would think they might be hungry for an opportunity to demonstrate that they can get something right. Given the events of the past 18 months alone, it should be obvious that there are many questions surrounding the current status of the current register. Using this as a basis of a permanent register without thinking through it carefully will likely cause problems down the line and potentially undermine the confidence in the register. Mr. Speaker, the many issues which need careful and detailed consideration fall into, my view, three categories. And there are more, but I'll just deal with three categories, which I will deal with in turn. Firstly, it is obvious that many people have been displaced throughout the country as a result of Hurricane Dorian. A number of residents of Abaco and Grand Bahama are still living with family and friends on other islands, or indeed in other countries. Many people's homes, which were destroyed, have yet to be rebuilt. Given that voter registration is currently based on premises in which you are ordinary resident, how will the permanent register account for this? Are Bahamians to potentially lose the right to vote because they happen to be living temporarily with family members? And this question is premised as when you read the Parliamentary Elections Act, ordinary resident is tied to premises in the constituency. In Grand Bahama, particularly the East Grand Bahama, in Abaco, particularly around Moises, Anderstown, going further north, Chesapeake, and not a lot of homes were destroyed. They have not been replaced. People were registered to those homes. So the question is, how are we going to account for those persons? I think in one of my conversations in the consultation, when we were talking, I mentioned perhaps the government may want to consider putting in a special provision because a number of these persons don't want to be where they are. Circumstances have been where they are, and they may wish to be home. They don't intend it. Where they are now is not their permanent home. They want to go back home. So should we give them the option to transfer to where they are now temporarily, or allow them the ability to vote where their mind is, where their home is in their mind? I think that is something that we need to think about. The same is true of those who have been displaced because of the economic hardship brought on by the lockdowns and curfews. For those Bahamians, not being able to afford to pay rent or a mortgage for most of this year means that again they had to move in with family or friends. Hopefully, they will be able to return to work. But if this permanent register is established before they are able to do so, what happens to their right to vote? These are some of the considerations we want to think about. The second, Mr. Speaker, the second main category of issues is to do with the pursuit of good practice. And I say good practice. Practice is not law. So if I say you didn't pursue good practice, it means what I have done is looked at how it was done in other jurisdictions, picked out what I thought would be the best approach, and you all might not have done that, or you may have decided, well, this is the way we're going. But I just invite you to consider good practice. The overriding principle is that we want to encourage all Bahamians to register and to vote. This is good for democracy. We need to do all that we can to encourage voting. Many countries, therefore, invest heavily in making sure that the original permanent register is as strong and problem-free and trustworthy as possible. They establish data protocols among government agencies. They send out initial inquiry cards to ask voters to confirm or update their details. They conduct universal or targeted door-to-door registration drives. They develop ways to simplify the registration process. In particular, Mr. Speaker, some countries have first introduced a provisional register. Now, I would liken that to the register in being that should have been going on as we speak by the Parliamentary Commissioner. He should have been registering now, and that could have been that could have been the register going on, right? So, no, please, no, I don't, no. Let's see. First of all, please understand what I'm saying. Understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that people cannot go and register today. What I'm saying, if you go to the Parliamentary Registration Act, the Parliamentary Commissioner, right, in preparation of the current register expiring or being put to an end, he is enjoined by law to start a new register. It is called a register in being. It has nothing to do with registration. That's what I'm saying. Right? And what I'm saying, you're not doing that. All you're doing is you're not doing that. All you're doing is putting persons on the current register. No, please. But check it out. I mean, you're a political director. I'm telling you what they are doing. You might believe they're doing what you say they're doing. All right, I can blame you then. I can blame you, man. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope the Attorney General is listening to me so he could advise properly, right? So what I'm saying is that some countries use what they call a provisional register. We could use what we call the register in being. That is the register that would be succeeding the current register once it is expired. So I'm just giving some examples of best practices as been used in other jurisdictions. You may not want to do it, but that's fine. That's your choice. But I'm just pointing out that I'm inviting you to consider the best practices when you're moving from a quinennial register to a permanent register. Right? And I ask, why are none of these best practices being adopted by this government? Every jurisdiction has or will experience at some time issues of potential voter fraud. For example, very recently, a foreign national was before our court. They said he had a Bahamian passport and he had a voter's card. Right? If we are to prevent fraudulent attempts to vote in the future, we need to ensure that the original register on which the permanent registration to be based is not flawed in this way or any other way. Speaker, the third The third main category of issue relates to how we ensure these proposed changes are embraced by the Bahamian people. This legislation mandates the introduction of a permanent voter's ID card and/or it foreshadows this biometric card. While this might facilitate administrative matters, there is a potential for mischief by state authorities in matters particularly relating to immigration or crime. For a government that came into power making hollow promises about transparency and accountability, it would not hurt to engage the Bahamian people fully around this issue with the biometric card. What are the implications for privacy if a person is required to have in their possession a biometric ID card? How is their data to be protected? What are the rights of the citizens to claim against the government in cases of abuses? Mr. Speaker, these are not just issues. These are not just issues for the present generation, but potentially it reach far into the future. While we might find the idea of voter suppression completely repugnant, remember, it was not 50 years ago. Our founding fathers might similarly have been horrified if they had been told that our Constitution would be fully suspended for almost a whole year. Think about that. None of us knows what the future holds, but we can legislate responsibly to allow for it. The introduction of a permanent register is not merely a procedural issue.
The member for Sudden Shores on a point of order.
The member is misleading, Mr. Speaker, to suggest that the Constitution has been suspended when something is being done consistent with what the Constitution allows is misleading. I would ask the member to withdraw that.
What I said, civil liberties have been suspended. The Constitution allows it. All right, I'm saying that I am satisfied knowing the founding fathers, and I knew them, most of them personally as well, that they would have been horrified to appreciate, to understand that civil liberties would have been suspended for almost a whole year. I used to wait almost a whole year.
Honorable member.
Right?
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Sudden Shores on a point of order.
Yes, on the same point of order. Mr. Speaker, we don't have to go far because the member just said what he said. The member said that our forefathers would be disappointed to know that the Constitution has been suspended for almost a year. Those were his words. The Constitution was suspended for almost a year. Now, if he wishes to change what he said, but I want him to withdraw his first statement, and if he wishes to say it another way, he can do that. But his first statement was misleading to this parliament and to the nation, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, I did say Constitution. I substituted Constitution to the civil liberties that are contained in the Constitution.
True.
And it's almost a year. And what was envisioned by the founding fathers, that initially it'll be 14 days. That's what they envisioned. And then we will be here, to debate whether it should be extended. I said they'll be horrified, as I have been and have not been in support of having civil liberties suspended for as long as it has been. All right, Mr. Speaker, the introduction of a permanent register is not merely a procedural issue. At this moment, we also struggle to see how it is so urgent. We wonder why it's so urgent. And I invite the government to consider what we have said and what we will continue to say on those issues. Right? We have indicated our support, as I said earlier. So if they would pause to consider these things, they'll have our support. We don't intend to make it controversial. I'm raising what I've said. I've raised questions, didn't criticize, And these questions is born out of my own experience and knowledge of these matters. I also brought into play some practical issues that will impact us going forward. So, Mr. Speaker, I said at the beginning, thousands of our fellow Bahamians are right now deeply worried about where their next meal will be coming from, how they're going to keep the lights on, how they're going to keep the roof over their heads. At the height of the COVID crisis, the government had to replace its Minister of Health. As the economic crisis worsens, the government has had to replace its Minister of Finance. Is this really the time to rush through the introduction of a permanent electoral register? I don't know. It's their question. I asked the question. So, Mr. Speaker, I say we support the permanent register, but I invite them to consider those issues that I think, and there are many other issues that we could address, right? And I invite them to consider them. Don't dismiss it, because it may not happen. The issues I raised may not be revealed today, but it may in the future.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, I now table the case that was referenced by the Honorable Member for Yamakraw. Order that the document do lie on the table. As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Centerville. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the business of this House do suspend until 3 p.m. so we can have our lunch and break. Thank you.
Honorable members, it's been moved and seconded that the business of this House be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. It's ordered that the business of this House stand suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.